is every journalist an investigative journalist? So this question was posed by Steve Weinberg in his book, The Reporter's Handbook. Actually, binalikan ko. Ito yung libro namin for the class. And binalikan ko siya for this lecture. Ayan, The Reporter's Handbook ni Steve Weinberg. Kasi maganda yung tanong niya. No? Ito yung first question sa buong libro. Is every journalist an investigative journalist? So, sabi niya, in an ideal world, napakaganda kung lahat ng mga journalists na nasa mundo ay actually investigative journalists. Meaning mga journalists ito na hindi lang sumusunod sa kung ano yung agenda of the day, kung ano yung nasa news cycle o ano yung araw-araw na nangyayari. Kundi investigative journalists are those who follow their own leads. They do enterprise stories, meaning they focus on stories that should be the agenda of the news cycle, kung ano dapat yung pinag-uusapan. But that doesn't mean na if you're not an investigative journalist, you're no longer a good journalist. Ina-argue rin ni Steve Weinberg na mahalaga yung iba't ibang roles ng mga journalists, no? Like for me, in essence, I am a beat reporter. I think medyo familiar naman kayo when I say I'm a beat reporter, di ba? Meaning I cover a particular beat. In my case, I cover the environment. So I do daily stories. Every day I submit stories. But I think like Ma'am Chua, kung si Ma'am Chua nga hindi niya kinaklasify yung sarili niya as an investigative journalist. Siyempre hindi ko rin gagawin yun. I don't classify myself as an investigative journalist. I believe that I'm a journalist, period, who does investigative journalism and enterprise and in-depth storytelling whenever I have the chance, no? So ito yung sagot ni Steve Weinberg, no? Ang sagot niya is every journalist can, yung emphasis niya is on can, no? Can be an investigative journalist. But he also stresses that there's nothing magical about becoming one. So hindi siya, you take this class, no, under kay Sir Seymour, na I'm sure ang dami yung natututunan. After this, napakagaling yun ng investigative reporter. So walang magic wand, walang magic spell that can make you an investigative journalist. Because it requires hard work, no? When journalism itself and communication itself is already hard work, yung investigative journalism even gets grittier than that. No? I'm not gonna say difficult kasi syempre journalism itself can be a difficult choice, no? And not just work, but a difficult choice for many. But maybe it requires a little more intensity. Sabi nga niya, it requires intense curiosity about how the world works or fails to work. And ito ay accompanied usually ng skepticism. So ano ba yung skepticism? Yung parang pagdududa, no? Na bakit ganito yung nangyayari, ano yung mali dito, at bakit hindi dapat ganito, no? Abetted by the undying, takpan yung screen ko, but it expresses itself through comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. So itong phrase na to, no, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. Maybe, hopefully narinig nyo na to in some of your journalism and communication classes, no, na ito yung goal mismo ng journalism is to disturb the comfortable. So parang yung mga nasa positions of power and privilege ay ma-question yung kanilang role in society. And yung mga nasa marginalized sectors of our society, no, mga poor, women, indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, ay marinig yung kanilang boses. So comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. So yung first question is, okay, I want to be a journalist, I want to be an investigative journalist. Paano ba ako makakahanap ng story? So ito ay some tips lang, some guideposts, if you may, in finding a story. Alam ko, I think may mga stories na kayo na gustong i-pursue under this class. Pero hopefully itong mga tips could help you further polish or refine yung mga topics na napili ninyo. So ano-ano ba yung some tips on finding a story? Number one is get out and get lost. Journalism does not exist in a bubble, no? If anything, journalism is a reflection of our society. So mahalaga na lubog tayo sa kung ano mangyari. But your next question to me would be, paano ako mag-get out? Lockdown nga, diba? Paano ako mag-get lost, diba? Hindi nga ako makalabas ng bahay. Like me, I mean, 1 year na akong hindi nakakabalik sa field. So, marami naman paraan ng getting lost, no? Ang sagot ko dito is, get lost in social media, diba? Get lost in the news cycle. Ibig lang naman sabihin nito is, maging aware tayo and involved kung ano yung nangyayari around us. Kasi nandoon karamihan yung mga story ideas natin. Usually, it's in our communities, di ba? Sa mismong subdivision natin, mismong barangay, mismong city. Napaka-ripe. Minsan nga kahit sa mismong street nyo, may storya dyan, di ba? For instance, ito, iniisip ko bakit ang tagal na naming walang street lights, for example, dito sa subdivision ko. So that's something that interests me. And hindi siya nalalayo, no? Maybe it says something about policies ng barangay namin. So yung ganon, I think yung very important trait for journalists is to always be extra curious about everything. Kung ano yung nangyayari sa mundo at sa paligid natin. So you also ask yourself, no, why does this matter? So siguro, you find something curious, yung next yung question is, ano ngayon, 'di ba? Why does this matter? Does it matter to just me or it matters to a lot more people? And then you also ask yourself, who are the winners and the losers in this situation? Anong ibig sabihin nito? Sino yung nagbe-benefit from what's happening? And who are those at the losing end? So, halimbawa, if it's a story on, yun nga, kawalan ng street lights sa inyong barangay, halimbawa lang, no? Sino yung mga nakikinabang doon? Sino yung mga nalalagay sa delikadong posisyon dahil wala kayong street lights? What happens to the community kung hindi kayo na po-provide ng ganitong klaseng public service that should be afforded and dapat inaasikaso ng inyong local government? So something like that, no? So just throwing some ideas out there. And then you also ask yourself, what are the intersections? So yung root ng question nito is, for example, I do environment reporting, di ba? A lot of people ask me, so you only write about the animals, no? You only write about plants? No, kasi environmental reporting, what makes it important and what makes it essential is yung exploring of its intersections. So halimbawa, I always say environment reporting is not just about, exploring or traveling to another mountain or finding new species, kundi ano ba yung ibig sabihin nito for our human existence, no, for our human survival. So for example, when we talk about climate change, ano yung intersections nito sa, for example, to our farmers, di ba? Paano sila naapektuhan ng pagbabago sa ating klima? And kung maapektuhan yung mga farmers natin, what does that mean? What does that anong impact noon sa ating food security bilang tayo ay, 'di ba, rice is life, 'di ba? So kung ang climate crisis ay naapektuhan ng ating agriculture, ano yung impact noon sa ating mga Pilipino na yung identity natin ay tied sa pagkain ng kanin o pag-consume ng kanin. So yun napakahalaga noon, no, kasi yung environment story for me, it's a story of life, period. And life means story of people as well. And then what should be done about it? So usually ito yung nakalimutan tanungin, no? Ilalabas natin sa mga story natin lahat ng mga problema, lahat ng issue, pero nakakalimutan nating ma-explore din kung ano ba yung mga solution. So ano ba yung mga solusyon para sa mga problemang ito. Ano yung pwedeng magawa? Kasi remember, yung journalism, it shouldn't just expose what's wrong, no? But it should give people agency or capacity to do something about something that is wrong. So yun, mahalaga na ma-highlight din natin kung ano yung pwedeng magawa or ano yung nagagawa na hindi masyado siguro na pag-uusapan. So, saan ba makakahanap ng mga klaseng story na to? No? So, where to look? So, halimbawa, may idea na kayo kung ano yung gagawin nyo. So, ano pa yung mga pwede nyong silipin? So, current issues, manood tayo ng balita. Alam ko, baka hindi na kayo nagbubukas ng TV. More so, hindi kayo nagbabasa ng dyaryo. Baka hindi pa kayo nakahawak ng dyaryo for quite some time. Ako naman din, dahil mahirap mag-access ng dyaryo, hindi ka nga makalabas, di ba? Unless may subscription kayo, di ba? Pero I'm sure, may online news naman, di ba? So makakabasa rin kayo nangyayari sa Facebook, sa Twitter, ganyan. Paper trail, simple lang naman to, no? Pag-follow ng mga dokumento, so mga laws, ordinances, contracts, memorandum of agreement, mga ganun. Any kind of document, court records, anything that involves, paper, paper trail. People trail, yan, mahalaga din yan. Ito naman yung tao, no? So kung sumusunod ka sa mga sinasabi ng documents, sinusundan mo rin yung mga sinasabi ng tao, no? Ano yung napag-uusapan ng mga officials, people in authority, and napaka-importante, yung mga taong nasa community mismo. Ano yung na-experience nila? Kasi sila dapat yung sentro ng ating storya. And then at the same time, news from other beats. Ibig ko lang naman sabihin dito, halimbawa, hindi porke environment reporter ako, yun lang yung tinututukan ko. I have to know what is happening, for example, with our foreign affairs, in the vaccination, in our health system. Kasi again, lahat ito ay tahi-tahi. Ngayon na nasa lockdown tayo, social media ay napakahalaga, no? Pati yung ating mga sariling communities. Ano yung nangyayari sa mismong barangay natin, sa mismong schools or college natin. And maganda rin tingnan yung history and past events. Again, yung existence natin as communicators, as storytellers. Hindi naman tayo yung first journalist to ever walk the earth, di ba? So marami ng mga naisulat, marami ng mga naisiwalat or naikwento. So pwede nating hugutan yun na, okay, naikwento na to in 2010, 2011, 10 years after, ano kaya nangyari? May pagbabago kaya? May improvement kaya? So yun. So gathering sources. So mga ilang tips lang, no? For me, what works best is working grassroots up than authorities down. What does this mean? Rather than pupunta ako diretso kay mayor or kay governor para malaman kung ano yung nangyayari dito. I prefer na pupuntahan ko muna yung mga communities, no? Aalamin ko muna ano po yung nangyayari dito, kakausapin ko sila, magkikwento sila sa akin, magkukwentuhan kami. At kapag nakuha ko na yung mga lahat ng mga detalye yun, saka ako pupunta dun sa person of authority na pwedeng makasagot ng mga katanungan din nila. Kasi mahirap kung didiretso ka dun sa person of authority kay mayor. Kay si mayor, madaling sabihin na, ay, ganito kasi yung ginagawa ko eh. Ganito yung ginagawa namin. Hindi mo madedebunk kung hindi mo alam kung ano talaga yung nangyayari at kinikwento sa'yo ng mga tao on the ground. So remember, journalism is also the essence of the discipline, of verification, no? I-verify at i-fact check natin yung mga nalalaman natin. So again, hindi porke sinabi ni mayor or ni barangay chairman na ganito na yung ginagawa, ay yun na yung paniniwalaan natin, di ba? Kailangan makuha natin yung hindi lang two sides, kundi yung napakarami pang sides of the story. Again, know what has been written. Alamin natin kung ano na yung mga stories na nandyan. And let both people and data talk. Like kong sinasabi, lalo na sa mga estudyante na nagsisimula or mga young journalists na nagsisimula magsulat, okay lang maging dumb, no? Okay lang maging bobo ng konti sa tanong natin. Kasi yun nga curious tayo, di ba? The moment na natakot kayong tanungin kasi baka isipin, ay, ano ba naman to? Hindi mo to alam. Ay the moment na mahihirapan ka to further dig deep kasi nag-assume ka na dapat alam mo or nag-assume ka na alam mo na. So, yung alam niyo naman, anything in life, mahirap mag-assume, di ba? Huwag tayo mga assumero at assumera. So, okay lang na let's ask the dumb questions. Pero this doesn't mean na pupunta kayo sa interview nyo, wala talaga kayong alam. Bala na. Magtatanong na lang kung ano-ano. Of course, you have to do your research first. You have to do your assignment first. So, harness the power of digital. No? Ngayon, sa social media, ang dami na. I'll give you an example, no? Yung sa community pantry, di ba? Ang daming mga nagsusulputang community pantry. And yung ginagawa ng ilang mga reporters namin is they're tracking it sa Facebook kung saan-saan nagsusulputan ito, no, sa iba't ibang parte ng bansa. So, obviously, hindi naman namin mapupuntahan lahat yon isa-isa. And I think the power of, the Philippines being the social media capital of the world, almost everyone is in social media. So mahalaga na ma-harness din natin itong power ng digital spaces and social. Hindi rin dapat tayo magpakulong doon kasi kahit sabihin ko na karamihan ay nasa social media, yung mga urban poor, baka wala naman silang Facebook, di ba? Or yung mga magsasaka, mangingisda, wala naman sila sa Twitter. Essentially, itong mga spaces na ito, Facebook or Twitter, they're usually echo chambers, di ba? Kung ano yung sinasabi ng isang tao, ini-echo lang. Isa lang, hive mind lang dyan isang brain cell lang yung gumagana dyan usually. So walang contradicting ideas and experiences. So mahalaga na kung maaari, lumabas pa rin tayo. Pero again, I understand, challenge siya under the pandemic. And yan, nabanggit ko na kanina, work your paper and people trails. So ito na, no, sabihin, okay, Ms. Jhesset, okay lahat yung mga sinishare mo, pero hindi nga kami makalabas no. So paano ba to? How can we report during a pandemic? So ano ba yung mga challenges na personally I've encountered? How to check facial reactions and body language? So halimbawa, ngayon, hindi ko sure kung nakikinig kaya sila or maliwanag kaya yung audio ko or nandyan pa ba kayo? Parang ganon. So, hirap. And for interviews, mahalaga yun no? Na nakikita mo, minsan kasi may facial cues. Halimbawa, tinanong mo ng something about an issue, pinagpapawisan na ng malamig, kitang-kita mo na, di ba? Sorry, may nag-chat. Ayun, may kumaway. Hi, Eliza. Salamat. Ang tawag dito, hindi mo, wait lang, hindi mo makikita yung mga ganung mga cues, no? Kapag mga Zoom interviews halimbawa. And then how do you get more supporting data or debunking data? How do you further connect with your sources? And ito yung importante, how do you find your human faces for your story? Kasi again, hindi nga lahat ay nandun sa digital space na yun. So some interview tips, no? For me, I think it's very important to prepare your questions beforehand. At least 5. I don't list down all of the questions. There is no way you can list all of the questions talaga. So ako, I just prepare like 3, 5 questions. Ano yung main structure ng interview ko, just so I'm guided. And then I just listen, no? Follow-up questions lang, conversation. Minsan may experience ako na I have 5 questions, yung 2 lang yung natanong ko. Kasi nakinig ako, nasagot niya na yung iba, hindi ko na kailangan tanungin pa yung 3, 4, 5 ko. Tapos may mga nasabi siya na mas interesting for me and I find na mas useful for my story. So, doon, nagkaroon na lang kami ng conversation, which is mahalaga, no? Kasi any interview naman, conversation lang yan. Make sure to do your assignment before your interview. As I said, don't go in your interviews blind, no? Though, alam ko, parang ano yun, parang exciting yun, di ba? Na parang, ang dami ko matututunan, di na lang ako magre-research. Pero, una, sayang yung oras nyo kung yung i-research nyo naman pala ay easily Googleable, di ba? Kung ginoogle mo, girl, malalaman mo agad yung tanong, ay yung sagot dun sa tanong mo. So for you to save your time to ask the more important questions, do your research. And when you do your assignment, you dig deep, you already know what to expect, mas magiging fulfilling and value-adding yung interview mo for your story. Avoid yes or no questions and ask your sources to expound, no? Huwag kayong mahiya na ipag-follow up pa sila or mas tanungin pa sila kung ano yung ibig sabihin. So, islang mga key questions, halimbawa ay, why do you think that's so? Bakit po kaya ganon? What do you mean by that? Anong ibig niyo pong sabihin when you say it's like this? Paano niyo po nalaman yon? And what's wrong with that? Ano pong mali yun? Mali doon? At ano po ba yung pwedeng dapat gawin? Or paano po ba ito dapat ginagawa? So, ayun. And kikita nyo kung medyo madaldal yung interviewee nyo, talagang dadaldalin niya kayo ng mahaba and magkikwento talaga siya. And itong mga points na ito, hopefully, magamit nyo siya for your story. For investigative journalism, it's important to leave your hard-hitting questions at the end or pepper them throughout their interview. No? What do I mean by this? Halimbawa, nakakuha kayo ng documents, nakapag-interview na kayo, and you have enough proof, for example, that yung mayor nyo sa inyong city ay may corruption, halimbawa lang to, corruption sa bagong building, ganyan. Hindi kayo papasok dun sa interview, uupo at sasabihin, Mayor, corrupt ba kayo? Or Mayor, totoo ba yung sinasabi nila na corrupt kayo or corrupt tong project nyo? Or binubulsa niyo yung pera dito sa project na to? Kung yun yung question number 1 nyo, expect nyo na hindi kayo makakarating sa question number 2, 3, 4, 5. Most likely, the doors will be shut on you. So, mahalaga na you leave this at the end or at least find a way na ma-ease into nyo yung question. So, make it a conversation first bago nyo tanungin yung tinatawag na parang boom questions, di ba? Or yun nga, yung mag-lead sa inyo into that particular soundbite or quote na kailangan ninyo. Napakalaga, take notes, have recordings, and backup. Alam ko, usually yung iba ginagawa, mag-on lang ng recorder, tapos bahala na, magdadala na lang sila. Pero paano pag nag-fail yung recording nyo, di ba? Paano kung bigla nyo mabura or mag-memory full? So, mahalaga na mag-notes din tayo, no? Ako, ang ginagawa ko ay take down notes. Nilalagay ko rin yung timestamp. Halimbawa, di ba, naka-on yung recorder sa gilid. Ninonote ko yung timestamp para malalaman ko ano yung mga important parts na babalikan ko. At hindi ko na kailangan pakinggan yung entire interview. Kasi kung kagaya ko kayo na nakapagsulat na rin kayo ng maraming istorya, ma-realize nyo yung transcription, no? Yung pagtatranscribe, yun yung isa sa pinakamahirap na part ng ating trabaho. Towards the end of the interview, pagtapos na, lagi kong tinatanong, is there anything else that you want to add? Meron pa po ba kayong mga gustong idagdag na baka hindi ko natanong? Mahalaga ito kasi this is a very open question, no? And in my experience, dito sa question na to, mas marami silang nasi-share na otherwise hindi mapag-uusapan dun sa entire 1 hour, 2 hour interview namin. And very important yon. So, share ko lang, no, yung sa pictures, hindi ko alam kung kilala nyo, that's ni Noshka Roshka, yung nandito sa center na nakasalamin na lady. She's one of great literary figures natin. And this is for a story I did on migrant Filipino healthcare workers na namatay because of COVID-19. And then yung dito sa baba, I'm sure medyo famous siya ngayon, no? Baka kilala niyo siya, si Dr. Deo Onda. Siya yung unang Pilipinong nakarating sa Emden Deep, or yung second deepest point of the world. So ako yung isa sa mga nakakuha ng mga first stories about it. And thankfully exclusive din yung interview with him na nakakita sila ng basura doon sa Emden Deep. So these are not necessarily investigative reports, no? Pero as I said, yung journalism, yung way of reporting natin, it remains regardless of whether it's investigative, it's feature writing, it's news writing. The way we gather stories and the way we report remains essentially the same. And then towards the end, again, ask for referrals. Sino pa po ba yung pwede kong makausap? Sino pa po kaya yung may alam dito na baka makapagbigay pa ng additional information? Maganda to kasi marerefer nila kayo sa talagang mga experts o kaya talagang mga kakilala nila or sources na otherwise baka hindi nyo kilala kung kayo lang yung nag-research on your own. So, ito yung isang challenge, no? So, nakuha nyo na yung lahat din ng information nyo. Paano nyo malalaman kung tama siya? So, vetting information under the new normal. Yung screenshots dito ay stills from a K-drama that I strongly recommend na panoorin ninyo. It's entitled Pinocchio. It's about the journalism world actually. And maganda siya. Kung alam niyo yung The Newsroom ng HBO, maganda din yun. Ito for me, medyo better siya than The Newsroom kasi mas na himay niya yung nuances, no, of journalism and journalism ethics. And ito isang quote from editor siya and senior reporter dun sa TV channel. Sabi niya, there's no reporter that's given a warm welcome in this world because a reporter's job is to dig up secrets that people want to hide. So ang ganda niya, I think very fitting din siya for investigative journalists. So okay, you found out some secrets, you found out some information na wala pang nakakaalam or hindi ka sure kung tama. So how do you vet or make sure that your information is correct? So ako, ang tip ko, even if it's under the new normal, go through your usual vetting process. O paano ka ba nagpa-fact check, diba? So you triangulate your sources. Ibig sabihin, yung isang source of information, hindi lang siya dapat galing sa isang tao. At least, dapat 3 tao, yun yung triangulation na tinatawag, no? 3 sources mo nag-a-agree dun sa information or iisa yung sinabi nila about that information. So you know that it may not be the absolute truth. I won't get into the debate of is there an absolute truth or not. Pero at least it is the closest to the truth that you can get, no? Because that's what's important in journalism, diba? It's the essence of the verification and truth telling. So yon, ano pa ba? Verify nyo with your usual sources. Make sure that your documents are aligned with your people trail. And if they're not, baka yun yung story nyo, di ba? Bakit hindi nagtutugma yung sinasabi ng dokumento sa sinasabi ng tao? Sabi ng dokumento, by 2020, tapos na yung Manila Bay Rehabilitation, halimbawa. Pero ano yung nangyayari on the ground? Again, ito yung famous quote, di ba, na when it rains, di ba, ang journalist's job is not to report from another person that it's raining, but to go outside and check kung umuulan ba talaga. So hindi porke sinabi ng whatever people in power na, oh, di naman umuulan pero kitang-kita mo sa labas ng bintana, bumabagyo. So yun yung trabaho natin, is to verify and to vet what is the closest to the truth. Fact check. Lalo na ngayon, di ba? Infodemic nga yung kinaharap natin, no? Yung challenge na ang daming disinformation and misinformation floating around. So, fact check po tayo. And use available tools. So, ilan lang to sa mga pwedeng yung magamit when you want to check the veracity of the information that you have. For example, yung Google reverse image search. Napaka-helpful na to kung may nakuha kayong image and you want to cross-check kung saan ba ito galing, ano yung source nito, kung talaga bang dito ito. I hope nagamit nyo na to or pwede nyo siyang itry gamitin in one of these days. Napakadali lang naman yan. Google Maps, syempre kung gumagawa kayo ng story that involves geolocations, so magandang ang Google Maps, no? Sinabi ng interview nyo, itong area namin, lagi kaming binabaha kasi nasa tabi kami ng dagat. So, chinek nyo, ginugol nyo yung address nila, ay nandun sila sa taas ng bundok. So, alam nyo na hindi sila nagsasabi ng totoo. That's one way to check, di ba? And Wayback Machine. Yung Wayback Machine is a very useful tool for, in general, not just for journalists. It shows you yung old versions ng websites and even the websites na pwedeng na-delete or binago or in-archive for a particular date. So, halimbawa, gusto yung tingnan ano yung nakasulat dito sa website na ito way back in 2015. Pwede nyo i-search yun sa Wayback Machine. So when using user-generated content, so ano ba yung user-generated content? Ito yung mga nakukuha nyo na content from social media, etc., etc. Don't forget to ask the 5 Ws and 1 H. I think yung pinakamahalaga dito is why and how. Bakit kinuha tong picture na ito and paano? So, yun. And kung may makita kayong mga dubious figures or mga kahina-hinalang pieces of information, ang magandang way around it is to highlight these untrustworthy figures. You put them in proper context, you explain their impact, and find other experts and stakeholders to assess yung figures na ito. So what does this mean? May nakita kayong information or data na parang kahina-hinala, no? Sabi, nag-spend daw ng 20 billion pesos for this project, pero nakita niyo yung project, halimbawa it's a reforestation project, halimbawa lang. Nakita niyo, ang liit lang nung area, it couldn't have been 20 billion pesos. So, i-highlight nyo siya, no? Bakit kahina-hinala siya? Bakit kaya? Explain nyo yung impact nun. If it's 20 billion pesos na ginastos for this very small project, saan pa pwedeng napunta yung pera na iyon, di ba? Pero hindi kayo exactly yung magsasabi nun. You can find experts na magpuput ng figures na yun in proper context and ma-assess nila kung ito ba ay tama, mali, may pagkukulang or wala. So I'm getting towards the end of my presentation. I just want to share a bit about my experience in, nahiya akong tawagin siyang investigative reporting. Again, ayoko ng labels, at least in my work, kasi it kind of tends to box it in a certain, diba, in a certain type of reporting. I'll just say it's a piece of journalism that I was proud to do. This was in 2019. I worked on a story, as I think na-mention na to kanina ni Sir, no, on illegal wildlife trade and trafficking. A bit of backgrounder, no. When I started this story, it was in February of 2019. And maliit lang dapat ito na storya. My editors just wanted me to do some research on wildlife trafficking. And essentially, actually, lang ako nun support lang yung work ko for a bigger piece. Hindi ako yung magsusulat talaga. And so I did the research, nag-request, ano ba yung mga unang-una kong ginawa? Just to let you into that process, no? So, ang pinakauna kong ginawa is I listed down, I did a research, Google desktop research lang, no? Binasa ko kung ano na yung mga nasulat dito, ano yung mga available data and information about this, and nung nakita ko na kung ano yung mga nasulat dito, nag-isip ako. Umupo ako sa aking thinking chair, ala Blue's Clues, at inisip ko, ano yung wala? Ano yung hindi masyado na-report? Or ano yung na-report pero parang kulang? Or ano yung na-report pero pwede ko pang dagdagan? So yun yung at least 3 key questions na naisip ko. And then, when I have that listed down, I started looking for sources. Sino yung mga experts na pwede kong makausap? Sino yung mga tao na pwede kong makausap? Meron akong I remember parang nag-2 columns ako noon. Meron akong column on, these are the experts. Tapos may column ako na, these are the documents that I need. I started sending out request letters for data. DNR yung bulk ng data ko, but also some from NGOs. And then for a good part of my kasi 3-part story siya, for a good part of the second piece of the story, walang data. So I built my own data set. Yun yung medyo matrabaho. That's why this entire endeavor took me 6 months to finish kasi medyo malaki yung story, and then at the same time kasabay kasi siya nung daily reporting ko, kaya medyo But it's okay, good journalism takes time. And mas gusto ko nga yun kaysa yung minamadali. Sabi ng editor ko, very important, this was the height of the, if you remember yung ostrich na nakawala sa Quezon City. Nagkakumahog lahat, di ba, na makuha yung information. Bakit may ostrich? Kanino tong ostrich? Etc. etc. Nung time na yun, may mga details ako na hindi pa makuha. Again, hindi naman to hard-hitting journalist, hindi naman to investigative groundbreaking. Hindi naman ako maglo-launch ng investigation on ostriches in captivity, di ba? Pero it was an exercise and a reminder from my editor na it's not important to be first, but it is important to be complete and accurate. So, ano naman kung Jumanji? Yeah. Ano naman kung unang-una ako, butas-butas naman yung information ko or mali-mali yung storya ko. So we waited. Admittedly, hindi kami yung first na nag-break nun. Pero kami yung medyo nakakuha ng complete details. Sino yung may-ari, saan niya binili yung ostrich na yun, paano siya napunta sa Quezon City. That kind of gives you a fuller picture or a bigger picture of what really happened. So, yon. For this story, ayan, ito yung isa sa na-realize ko pala, no? Yung wildlife trafficking and trade, reported na siya, pero yung hindi masyadong napag-uusapan is paano siya nagiging worse or papaano mas nagiging prevalent yung wildlife trafficking and trading dito sa Pilipinas through social media. Bakit siya magandang tingnan? Yun nga, di ba? Halos lahat siguro ng Filipinos, maybe 9 out of 10 Filipinos may Facebook, di ba? Dahil may free, di ba? May free Facebook, free data. So, nagiging talamak din yung paggamit ng Facebook pages sa wildlife trafficking and trade. And dito yung sinabi ko na bumuo ako ng sarili kong dataset. So, ano yung ibig kong sabihin dito? Dito ba yun? Ayan, ito yung 3 days kasi siyang tumakbo, front page ng The Inquirer noong August 2019. Malaking pasasalamat sa aking mga editors and mentors that really supported the story. Yung second part is, which is my favorite, yung sabi ko, binuo ko yung dataset. I got a list of from a source. I can't name the source kasi syempre I have to protect the source. I got a list of Facebook groups na nag-engage into wildlife trafficking. So what I did was, ako one person lang to endeavor. Binuksan ko lahat ng Facebook groups na yun. Pinuntahan ko siya, yung iba nag-join ako, yung iba, parang mga 2 months ko siyang nilurk. Yung iba talaga sumali ako, which is actually delikado yung ginawa ko kasi I was exposing myself. Pero ayun naman, I made ways to protect myself as well. Kasi yun yung mahalaga, di ba? Hindi porke parang hard-hitting journalist na kayo, sabihin niyo, okay lang, magpapakamatay ako for this job. No. Stories are not worth dying for, diba? There's no story worth dying for. It is more important that you remain alive as a journalist so that you can continue telling these stories. So, ayun. So, ang ginawa ko dito, parang pinuntahan ko lahat, as many as I can, na mga Facebook groups. Tapos yun, kumuha ko ng mga screenshots, inaral ko yung activity nila, paano sila nagpo-post, paano sila nag-interact, paano sila bumibili ng mga endangered species doon. Very interesting yung mga nakita ko. Pero hindi ito effort ko lang, no? I mean, yung dataset, yung pag-aaral dun sa mga Facebook groups, mostly that's me talaga. Pero I sought for guidance from my sources and yung ating mga wildlife enforcers and experts to explain to me kung ano talaga yung nangyayari. So it wasn't my own interpretation alone, but it was backed and verified by the wildlife experts and enforcers na nakausap ko, which is important kasi hindi naman to solo endeavor lang for me as someone who's trying to look into this. So yung third part ng story was about prosecution. Yan, ito makita niyo may mga charts kasi I was able to get data on the confiscation of cases, of confiscation of wildlife and the conviction. So kita niyo ito, yung operations versus ganyan ka-konti. So, yung question is, bakit ganyan? So, yun yung parang naging rin ng story ko na, so, ayan. Actually, that ends pala representation. So maraming salamat po sa pakikinig. I'm placing here my Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. I usually share my info, and then my email. Please get in touch with me anytime. And I'm so happy to be here and to be able to share. And I'll be more than happy also to answer any of your questions or hear your comments or thoughts.
Okay. Maraming salamat, no, Ma'am Jhesset, no? Meron na tayong tanong, no? Ito ba? Meron na tayong tanong from Louie. Louie, can you ask your question personally?
Hello po. Rinig po ba?
Yes.
Yes po.
Good afternoon po, Miss Jhesset. Since ano po, sinabi niyo naman po kanina na it's okay to be curious. So magtatanong na po ako.
Of course.
As a journalist po, sa tingin niyo po ba delivering information is a way of delivering justice as well? Kasi as journalist naman po, hindi naman po tayo mismong nag-aayos ng problem, 'di ba? Parang nagpe-present lang po tayo ng information from bird's eye view nga po kung sinabi. So do you think how can we serve justice by just presenting facts?
Okay. Hi, Louis? Luis.
Kahit Louie na lang po. Opo.
Louis. Okay. Hi, Louis. Thank you for that question. That's actually a really good question. And I've never been asked this question, so I'll try to answer it well. Alam mo, tingin ko, bago ko siguro tutukan yung tanong, no? Minsan kasi for journalists, we feel that burden na our story should change the world, di ba? Especially if we see injustice. We feel sometimes na, okay, I'm telling this story, I'm informing you na ganito yung nangyayari, ganito nahihirapan yung mga tao, ganito sila inaabuso, inaapi. And we feel in our heart of hearts na when we tell that story, mababago yung nangyayari, no? Aayos yung mundo, aayos yung sitwasyon nila, etc. Pero I think, hindi naman siya naive to think that way. I think as journalists, kahit na maging jaded tayo or pagod sa ginagawa natin, hindi dapat mawala yung idealism and passion natin to think that our journalism and our work can change something. I'm saying something. I'm not saying the world or the problem itself. Paano ko ba itatry yan ilapat sa work ko, halimbawa, di ba? I've devoted a big chunk of my time doing in wildlife trafficking stories. I'm still doing it now, but it still continues. Our endangered animals are still being snatched away from forests. Poachers are still out there, diba? This is still a big multi-billion business, and I'm just one reporter trying to tell these stories. Siguro mahirap sagutin kung delivering information is delivering justice. Pero I'll try to dissect that question in two ways. Number one, I think delivering information is a way, delivering accurate and truthful information is a way of giving justice to what our readers should know. Okay? Meaning, when we do good journalism, we give justice to the stories that we gather and to the sources of these stories. Meaning, if I do my work well, may nakausap ako na, let's say, well, ang tagal ko nag-cover, almost more than a year ako nag-cover ng drug war, no? Sa dami ng story na nagawa ko, natigil ba yung patayan? Ang bigat nun ang bigat na tanong nun, di ba? Pero for me, yung work ko is just part of the bigger work out there, right? Kahit nasabihin ko na ako yung isang journalist na nagsulat nito, marami kaming mga journalists na gumagawa nito. So my work is just one small contribution to that bigger move for justice for them. So how can you give justice? Not necessarily solving the world's problems, but how can you give justice through your work? You give justice to your work by making sure that it's accurate, it's verifiable, and it's truthful. And with that, you give justice dun sa narrative na binibigay sa'yo. I'd like to end my response here by saying na yung mga stories na nakukuha natin, when people share their stories with us, they trust us with their stories. They give their trust to us, not na pag kinausap nila tayo, masosolve natin yung problem nila, na hindi na sila magugutom, hindi na sila maghihirap, hindi na sila apihin. Pero naniniwala sila na we will handle or we will tell their story accurately and we can help amplify their situation. We can help raise awareness about their situation. And I think yun yung mahalaga. Yun naman yung role natin as journalists, di ba? We hold up a mirror to society. So kung ano yung nangyayari sa mundo, nire-reflect yon ng ating work. And I guess yun. If we do our jobs well, we take care of the trust that is given to us by the people that we talk to. And hopefully, yung mga people na talagang nag-work towards, giving justice, such as, our actual justice system, or yung mga lawyers, or yung government institutions who should be protecting our people, hopefully with the stories that we write, ay mabuksan din yung isip nila at ma-aware sila at malaman nila na ito yung mga dapat na ginagawa nila as institutions who are tasked to protect the people. Ayun. Hindi siya direct answer. I'm sorry. It's hard to answer the question. Pero, yun. I hope
So, okay, ma'am. Thank you po. Wow. Thank you po. Nasagot naman po.
Okay.
Journalism din kasi, no, meron tayong tinatawag na minimum story, no, at saka maximum story. Yung minimum story usually ay maipaalam lang, no, sa readers or sa viewers na meron kang mapakulong, no. May managot doon sa temang 'yon, no. Meron ba tayong tanong from Eliza? Eliza?
Hello po.
Hello.
Hello. How do you handle an uncooperative interviewee po?
Eliza, I'll try to let you expound on that question. What do you mean by an uncooperative interviewee? Kasi maraming types.
So, you have mentioned earlier na if in case that we or in the future we try to ask someone who's in authority, like a politician or someone who has the authority, paano pag hindi po nila or hesitant po sila na sagutin yung question nyo? How will you handle it po?
Okay, salamat, Eliza. Common yan, no? Very common na hindi nga na ayaw lang sagutin yung tanong mo. Hindi ka talaga kakausapin. Hindi ka talaga papansinin para hindi ka nag-exist. In my 5 years of experience, lagi ko iniisip, lagi ako naghahabol sa mga taong ayaw sa akin. 'Di ba? Parang love. 'Di ba? Hindi ako crush ko. Ayaw akong pansinin. Kailangan kita sa storya ko. Yung ideal way to answer this is to be determined and super kulit. Darating kasi rin yung point na makukulitan sila ng sobra sa'yo. At hopefully, sasagutin nila yung tanong mo or papansinin ka nila. Though, mahirap ngayon, di ba? Mahirap mangulit. Kasi, paano ka nga mangungulit? Zoom. Pwede mo ba silang tawagan everyday, text everyday? Hindi na siya kagaya ng dati na pwede akong bumalik-balik sa offices nila. Hi, sir! You remember me? May request lang po ako. Hindi na siya ganun eh. So, if it won't work that way, I can say na another workaround is to do your assignment first. Alamin nyo kung ano yung mga nangyayari. Kapag alam niyo na yung pinaka-meat ng story nyo, saka nyo siya balikan at maghain kayo ng small part ng story nyo sa kanya. For example, sir, I've done my research, nag-interview na ako ng mga ganitong tao, ito yung nalaman ko about this. Ano pong masasabi nyo about this? Okay? Ngayon, mapapaisip siya, shucks, may alam na siya. Ayaw ka pa rin kausapin. Another pwedeng follow-up nyo doon is to say, sir, for the purposes of fairness, di ba, and balance in this story, I want to get your side. Or else, I will air my story, I will publish my story without your side. And I can say po na I tried to get your side pero you didn't respond. Di ba? You're giving him, her, a chance to respond to the allegations against him or her. Kung ayaw pa rin, then ilalagay mo sa story mo na you tried to reach him or her for comment pero hindi siya nag-respond. despite multiple attempts to do so. If you really need a particular information and hindi nyo talaga makuha from this particular person, I'd like to think na may ibang mga makakasagot. So kung ayaw ka talaga sagutin ni Mayor, baka ni Vice Mayor, or baka ng civil society organization or NGO who works in that particular issue. So ang mahalaga lang you try. Huwag niyo mag-assume agad na, ay, di naman pala to nakikipag-usap or masungit pala to, hindi ko na lang i-reach out. Kasi mamaya, gusto ko pala talagang kausapin, hindi mo lang sinubukan. So, yon. So, wag mag-assume again. And try lang natin. Yung
Yes.
journalist, makukulit talaga, no? Stalker na nga makulit pa. So,
Yes
part
po.
yun. Part yun
Pasok
ng
din
work.
po kasi dito, I think napasok din po kasi dito yung issue with, before with Maria Ressa. Yung reporter po na kinwestiyon yung side ni President or yung spokesperson. Like,
Mm-mm.
may isang reporter kasi na nagtanong about the issue, bakit pa daw binuksan, and ano daw po yung insight nung side nila. So, yun po yung tinanong ng reporter pero wala pong na-receive na, na answer si reporter. And as what I have, observed after that incident, same po nung sinabi nyo na sinabi na lang ni reporter dun sa isang article na walang nakuha na side.
Mm-mm. Ayun. So yun nga, mahalaga na we try to reach people for their responses. And yun nga, kung wala, and then you just say, nangyari na rin sa akin yan many, many, many times. Ayaw talagang kausapin. Pero at least sinubukan ko.
Kasi naging
Thank
concern
you.
salamat, Eliza. Naging concern din yan doon sa klase namin, no, na may mga nagtanong na paano kung journalism nga siya and you would like to get both sides, no, paano nga kung hindi nagre-reply yung kabila? Or usually, no, doon sa mga madalian na reports, paano kung by the deadline wala ka pa rin na-receive, no, na sagot from the other camp? May dalawang tanong daw si CK. Okay pa ba?
Yes po. Go lang.
Okay. CK?
Hi po, Miss Jhesset. Good afternoon po.
Good
So yun
afternoon.
po, okay lang po ba? Dalawa po yung tanong ko, pero madali lang naman po, di naman po heavy.
Okay.
So yun po, sa ano po muna, yun po, yung first question ko po. Living in a third world country, yun po, yung bansa po natin. Do you think po ba in any way it has a hindrance or impact po sa tools niyo po as a journalist in your field po sa environment?
Isang question ba muna?
Basahin ko na, okay lang po ba? Basahin ko na rin po yung second. Or gusto niyo po, sagutin niyo po muna yung first question.
Magkakabit ba sila or medyo magkaiba?
Medyo magkaiba po, Miss Jhesset eh.
Okay lang, para hindi na lang mawala yung train of thought ko dun sa first question. Siguro I will challenge that question first. Sorry. Not you, the question. I think, una, iwaksi natin or alisin natin sa isip natin yung konsepto na third world country tayo. I believe in terms of our economic power, hindi na tayo poor, 'di ba? Middle class nga tayo eh. Middle class yung karamihan sa atin. Though ang nangyayari sa atin, yung mahirap patuloy na nagiging mahirap at yung mayaman patuloy na yung mayaman. So yun lang, siguro yun yung first point ko, na iwaksi or alisin natin yung notions of poorness or the notion of, kay Nick Joaquin to nakuha ko, yung notion of smallness natin bilang mga Pilipino, bilang mga taga dito sa Pilipinas. If not for the questions of development, if anything, yung politically correct term doon ay developing country, di ba? But I understand that's also just to soften the blow na mahirap kayo. Pero yun nga, hindi naman kasi tayo mahirap per se. So, ang question mo is if it challenges yung tools ko as a journalist. I guess, I can say na definitely may mga resources pa sana na pwedeng kung ma-afford, or hindi na lang ako, no? May mga resources na yung mga newsroom sa Pilipinas in general could afford if we are in a much better economic position. Ganun na lang natin sabihin. It's not so much as us being a poor country. It's the institutions in the news media or in the media per se that are challenged. And this is more felt in countries like the Philippines kasi hindi pa deeper yung understanding natin on the importance of, the media as a fourth estate or as a watchdog of society. What do I mean by that? In the US, challenged din naman yung kanilang mga news institutions, right? May nagpa-plummet yung mga yung mga sales nila ng mga dyaryo, ng mga nila ratings sa TV ganyan. And napakaraming mga smaller papers na nag-fold up. Pero most of them understand the importance of journalism. That's why even though it's the pandemic, ang daming nag-shoot up, no, yung subscription ng New York Times, ng Washington Post. Kasi people understand that information is vital. Yun siguro yung kakulangan dito sa Pilipinas, no? Hindi pa ganun kalalim yung understanding and kamalayan natin ng kahalagahan ng information and journalism para mag-sustain yung ating democracy, para mag-sustain tayo bilang free people, di ba? So yun. So I think it would benefit more if in the Philippines, institutions, news institutions or media institutions will be supported by the people. I'm not saying it should be funded by companies or syempre for profit karamihan yung political I won't go into this pero yung political economy ng news media sa Pilipinas ay for profit, 'di ba? Profit oriented tayo, hindi tayo public service purely. So mas maganda kung mas may understanding yung mga tao sa kahalagahan natin and they would support us, our industry. Pero for me, I think as a journalist, as a Filipino journalist, no, hindi naman ako super hampered by, being in the Philippines, hindi ako maka-access ng Google or di ba? Mabagal yung internet, di ba? Nag-unstable nga yung connection ko minsan eh. So yung mga ganong limitasyon lang, pero hindi siya sasabihin ko na hindrance na hindi ko magawa yung work ko well because I'm a Filipino journalist. If anything, being a Filipino journalist makes me more resourceful, di ba? It makes me more madiskarte compared to my counterparts in the Western world na sanay sila na they have easier access to information, no? Ako, kailangan kong mag-go through hoops and through the fire to get more information. But I think that makes my work hindi naman better, pero the fact that I put in more work, the fact na nagiging mas pulido siya, no? Mas solid siya for me. So yun. Waksin natin yung idea of smallness, no? Kaya natin yan. Magagaling tayo.
Kaya nadagdag ko lang no na yun nga yung ang kagandahan din no sa Pilipinas no ang laki ng penetration ng social media sa atin no at nakakatulong yun no dun sa mga journalists no. Kanina dinemonstrate no ni Ma'am Jhesset no yung kung paano yung magjo-join ng Facebook groups and then you would get information no and you just need to know no how to vet no or how to fact check no yung nagagather mo na data. Sige, ano yung pangalawang question mo?
Noted po Miss Jhesset dun sa 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 sinabi niyo. Thank you po. So yun po Miss Jhesset. For my second question po, in your 5 years journey po as a journalist, have you met fellow journalists po along the way from our neighboring Southeast Asian countries? Kung kahit isa lang po, kahit konti lang po. Kung meron man po, ano po kaya yung parang mga traits nila na masasabi niyong madidistinguish po na ako dito ako sa Philippines, sila as a journalist dito sila sa nationality nila. Ano po yung parang napansin niyo na pinaka big difference po? Yan po.
CK, Southeast Asia lang, meaning regional counterparts?
Yes po, Miss Jhesset.
Sir, ko lang bago ko sagutin yung tanong ni CK, may I just say na ang gaganda ng mga tanong ng mga estudyante po ninyo. I'm so happy and challenged and humbled. Pero yun, ang gaganda po ng mga tanong. Usually kasi when I give these talks, either hindi po sila nagtatanong kasi nahihiya or hindi masyadong malalim. Pero ito po, ang ganda ng mga questions na naibabato sa akin. Salamat ulit, CK. I'm very fortunate. Ang dami kong kakilala, no? Hindi lang from Southeast Asia, pero from all over the world na mga journalists talaga. Kasi honestly, yung industry hindi siya ganun kalaki. In one way or another, you will meet other journalists from around the world. Regarding your question, honestly, hindi ko siya napagnilayan. I mean, never ko siyang naisip na what makes... Siguro kasi hindi naman ako yung mode ko eh. What makes me different? What makes me special? Kasi parang, di ba, ang idea natin as journalists, regardless of where we're from or where we're reporting from, yung work natin ay iisa, di ba? Yung purpose natin, bakit natin to pinili as a profession, as a career, ay iisa. Ano ba? Wala akong mabigay exactly na difference. Siguro, let me try similarities. Napansin ko, and these are not traits, these are more of situations. Most of the countries, if not all of the countries in Southeast Asia are democracies, if we are under democracies, are under threat. And if it's not the democracy under threat, it's the press and the press freedom under threat. If you follow yung mga nangyayari sa mga ibang bansa, no, grabe yung repression against journalists. Whether it's state-backed, meaning it's because of their repressive governments, or it's because of misinformation and disinformation, no? Napakalala ng nagiging epekto ng false information or fake news. But let's not call it fake news. There's no such thing as fake news, di ba? Sa demokrasya ng iba't ibang mga bansa dito sa Southeast Asia. So yun yung napansin kong similarity. Parang lahat tayong mga journalists in Southeast Asia ay struggling against how do I put it? Parang the walls are closing in on us. Lumiliit yung mundo natin because of repression and harassment and threats against journalists. So if anything, I don't think we should think so much of our differences, di ba? Pero more so of our similarities, di ba? Of how we can gather together, how we can have solidarity to work together as journalists. I'm very proud to say naman na ang dami ng mga collaborative work between Southeast Asian journalists. At again, ito last point siguro, iwaksi din natin. Favorite ko iwaksi today. Pero parang basagin din natin yung notion na ay special tayo kasi yung Philippines, it's among 'di ba, highest in press freedom in the world. That's no longer the case, guys. Would you really call it press freedom if journalists and reporters, especially sa provinces natin, ay threatened with harassment, libel cases, and even killed? That's not freedom. Kahit nasabihin natin na nakakapag-publish ka nga ng dyaryo, nakaka-ere ka ng TV, ngayon nga, pati TV, di ba? Tinatanggalan ng prangkisa. So, freedom ba yun? So, wag nating ilagay yung sarili natin sa special privilege bubble na, at least kami, nakakapagsulat pa kami freely. That's not the case anymore. All the more na we should band together, we should be in solidarity with other journalists, not just in the region but around the world, who are facing these same threats para sabay-sabay natin silang malabanan and makasurvive tayo while doing the work that needs to be done.